Hello friends, thanks for joining me today. It has been quite a while since I've made a video. My last wrap up was in May. It was for the month of May. And I blame that on a very busy summer because on top of just doing a fair amount of just social fun summery, things and social engagements, I was also in the thick of planning my September wedding. It was the perfect day, everything went so well, just had so much fun, but the last 3 months leading up to it in particular were so busy. I had no time to film, and now I just have a huge backlog of reviews to go through. So I tried to shorten down my reviews as much as I can. It's still going to be a really long video, but this is going to be a review of all the books that I read this summer, basically starting from June, July, and August. So that's a lot to get through, so let's go. Truthwitch by Susan Dennard, narrated by Cassandra Campbell, the audiobook. I listened to the audiobook. This is the first book in the Witchlands YA fantasy series, and the main character, Safi, is a Truthwitch, meaning that she can tell when someone is lying. And the continent is on the brink of war. It's in the final months of a peace agreement between empires, and she winds up on the run as people are trying to get their hands on her for political advantage. This was like a 3.75 4-star. I think that it was like a prime example of your standard YA fantasy in a good way. There's magic, there's some action, some politicking, and of course a romance, and it also highlights a really strong best friend bond, which was very enjoyable. I think that I really am starting to kind of age out of this caliber of fantasy a little bit, but it is a solid start to a series. So I do recommend if you really enjoy YA fantasy, but I'm not sure yet if I'm going to continue the series. When All the World Sleeps by Lisa Henry and J.A. Rock. This is a dark contemporary romance about these two men who live in a small town in South Carolina. They are gay, and we have Bellman, who's a cop, and Daniel, who killed a man while sleepwalking, and only feels safe and that he's not a danger to others by chaining himself to his bed at night. And Bellman winds up agreeing to secure him and watch over him at night for his well-being and find ways to kind of control him. This was a 3.5 star. There's a Dom sub BDSM dynamic between Belle and Daniel, respectively, and they're both kind of feeling their way around this unorthodox relationship. It has some sweet moments, some sexy moments, but this wasn't a fun read. It was very sad. Daniel hates himself for what he's done, and he wants Belle to hurt him, not in a sexy way, but because he feels he deserves to suffer. So while this book does have a guy chained to a bed, which is normally something that I would quite enjoy in terms of spice, the context isn't hitting the mark for me. I'm not looking for sad and depressing BDSM, but this had better writing than I was expecting. It kept me reading, and if you enjoy the hurt comfort trope, then this could be a really good one for you. It does have a happy for now ending as well. Witching Moon by Poppy Woods, narrated by Melissa Moran and Lori Prince. This is a contemporary fantasy romance about a witch named Alondra who has a familiar named Beelzebub, who is a moth, who's adorable. She's not a powerful witch, but one night she messes up a blessing spell and accidentally summons the moon, whose name is Luna, and Alondra has to try and figure out how to get her back home. This was a 3.75 star, very cute, very fun. I enjoyed the narrators a lot, and the audiobook, it read the way that Japanese anime sounds. There's just some dialogue and narration that just gives off very, flabbergasted anime protagonist energy, like in a fun way. The magic is very hand-wavy and loose. I wish that the familiars played more of a role or were explained more, because they are different witches have different familiars. And to be honest, like Alondra herself doesn't really do much. And there are some sexy scenes between Alondra and Luna that were good, well written, didn't overstay their welcome. And overall, this was enjoyable. Not a masterpiece or anything, but very readable and, gay. So Let Them Burn by Kamilah Cole. I listened to the audiobook, narrated by Kaylor Lee and Kamali Minter. This is the first book in a YA Jamaican-inspired fantasy duology, and you're following a girl named Farron, who was a child savior chosen by the gods, who helped free her island from oppressors in the past, and in the present she's kind of cut adrift now that she's saved her people, and it has kind of made her bitter and mean. And at a peace summit, her sister Elara ends up magically bonding with a dragon that serves the enemy country, and they have to figure out a way to break this bond without killing Elara in the process. This was a 3.5 star. I enjoyed the twist of the chosen one trope here. I enjoyed the sisterly bond between Farron and Elara. Elara is into women, and there's a pretty good little romance that develops there. I wish that there was more dragon stuff than there was. But the gods and deities interact with the characters and the world, which is something that it's a trope that I enjoy. But there's also like a lot of contrived drama and reveals that happen like for plot reasons, basically. Elara goes off to a sort of academy setting as well, which I wasn't expecting or particularly like looking for going into this book. It ends in a bit of a cliffhanger. It was good, but I don't think I'm gonna continue on with the second book. The Duke I Tempted by Scarlett Peckham. This is a historical romance about a woman named Poppy Cavendish, who's a botanist and runs her own nursery. And she meets Archer, who is the Duke of Westmead, and in exchange for funding her work, she agrees to marry him and give him an heir. And Archer experienced a tragedy in his past that has kind of closed him off to the idea of love, but of course, their true feelings get in the way of their marriage of convenience. And part of the plot is that Archer is a member of this illicit BDSM club, and it would be disastrous to his reputation if anyone were to find out. And this was a solid 4 star. In June, I kind of went on a bit of a quest to find more romance that I enjoy, and typically where I start is finding books that have some kind of BDSM element in it. My main complaint with this is the frankly egregious use of the miscommunication trope. It started to drive me insane. Some of that is okay and expected, it drives drama, but it happened way too much that it started to get frustrating and not fun. But aside from that, I did enjoy this more than I expected, for sure. I like the Regency era England setting. Poppy was an independent heroine. Archer wasn't a jerk. I was rooting for them. There was kind of a disappointing lack of BDSM scenes in this book, on-page BDSM scenes, but I did genuinely enjoy it. It was well written and had some clever lines. I would definitely consider reading the next book, which follows Archer's sister. I think that historical romance could be, a romance genre that I enjoy compared to contemporary romance. The Water Outlaws by S.L. Huang. This is a historical fantasy that is a gender-bent retelling of a classic Chinese novel called Water Margin, and it's about this group of outlaws who do what they can to fight back against a corrupt empire by turning to banditry, basically. And the main character, Lynn Chong, ends up being forced to join this group, while a friend of hers named Lu Junyi gets pulled into doing research on something that will make the Empire more powerful and unstoppable. This was a 2.5 star. Its worst offense was just being boring. I just couldn't get invested in any of the characters or either of the two main plot lines too heavily. And like after a certain point, Lynn Chong just doesn't feel like a main character. She just like blends in with everyone else. I think Lu Jinyi's storyline was more interesting overall, but still not like super gripping. And there is magic tied to these artifacts called God's Teeth, but like it's very just kind of hand wavy. They're magic. The writing was a little bloated and belaboring the point. The fight scenes were cool. And there was this one scene that involved like cannibalism, and it was like, oh, like, okay, I don't know, I guess this is fine. No one seems to have a problem with this. But yeah, so there was nothing like egregiously wrong with Water Outlaws. The writing and characters just didn't hook me. The Atlas 6 by Olivie Blake. I did listen to this on audiobook, and there are like 7 narrators, so I'll put their names somewhere. And this is a contemporary fantasy about these 6 brilliantly smart young people who are recruited by a man named Atlas to join the legendary and exclusive Alexandrian Society, which has access to just incredible knowledge and power. It takes place in our world, but magic exists, and they're told that only 5 of them will actually be inducted into the society after a year of study for initiation. This was a 2.5 star for me. There were some, very poetic and beautiful passages and language, but it also really belabored the point. Not much really happens in this book. People have a lot of musings and thoughts. They interact, snarkily and have dramatic conversations and these confrontations that achieve nothing. But I'm not the target audience, I don't think. I don't know if I'm really a dark academia girl. I don't know. Some of the characters were kind of entertaining to follow, but others were boring or irritating. There's this dark academia vibe, and then there's the occasional appearance of a side character who is half mermaid, half satyr, which just took me right out of it every time. Like, what book am I reading at this point? So this just wasn't for me. I have no doubt that some people love this, but I wasn't connecting with it, and I won't be continuing the series. Not Good for Maidens by Tori Bovalino. This is a contemporary horror fantasy inspired by the poem Goblin Market, which I'm only vaguely familiar with. I've never read it. It's about a girl named Lou who comes from a line of witches from York in England, and one day her best friend and young aunt Neela is kidnapped by goblins and spirited away to the Goblin Market. And this is told in a dual POV split timeline, one following Lou trying to rescue Neela, and the other is following Lou's older aunt May in the past, who fell in love with a goblin girl from the market. This was a 3-star. It started out promising, there's a kind of dark fae energy about the market and the goblins, very bloody and creepy, and the writing was very descriptive and moody and beautiful. And I did enjoy those things, but we kept rehashing the same ideas and actions and thoughts just over and over again, so it made it feel like we weren't getting anywhere in the plot quick enough. The romance between May and the goblin girl was super insta-love, but there was something very compelling and sharp about it. The witches are green witches, not the spell-slinging kind or anything, and I think that this book could have been at least 50 pages shorter. I've read the author's debut novel called The Devil Makes Three, and I enjoyed that one a little bit more than this one, but the cover is stunning. Silver Under Nightfall by Rin Chupeco, narrated by Matthew Spencer. This is an adult fantasy following a man named Remy Pendergast, who is an outcast amongst his people and who hunts vampires. And when this new, very dangerous breed of mutant vampires is discovered, he gets recruited by a vampire couple to help them investigate. And there is a polyamorous romance between Remy and the couple. This was a really interesting read. I gave it a 3.5 star. There are a lot of different plot threads that I just had a hard time following. The progression of all of them were a bit too slow. It all just kind of lost me. But especially in the second half of this book, it gets real horny, and I was actually here for it. The romance between the three of them really shines. It outshines the plot, in my opinion, absolutely. The two vampires help show Remy his worth, show him what love can look like. There's spice, tons of flirting. I don't know, it was cute and fun and sexy. There's a pretty cool plot twist at the end. This is the first book in a duology, but I don't think I'm going to continue on. I don't know, I think that it's worth reading for the romance alone, and it does have gothic vibes, it's vampires for adults. So I don't know, definitely check it out if it piques your interest. The narrator of the audiobook was great. He chose not to try and make his voice super high pitched and girly or anything for the female characters, and it worked really well. Diavola by Jennifer Marie Thorne, narrated by Andy Arndt. This is about a summer vacation to Italy that goes wrong. And you're following Anna, who meets up with her family at this old villa in a remote Italian village, and the family is varying degrees of insufferable, and it just kind of gets worse and worse as the family vacation goes on. And at one point, my jaw just was on the floor. It'll get your emotions running high. And on top of that family drama, of course, the villa is haunted by a very malevolent presence. And this was a 4.5 star, a fantastic summer horror. It is a bit of a slow burn. You see plenty of slice of life of the family on vacation, but the spooky things also don't take long at all to start kicking in and are pretty constant throughout the book. And everyone in the family is experiencing things. I really liked Anna's personality and her just kind of dark, suffering humor. Loved the supernatural elements. There's this creeping feeling of unease that builds on top of the frustrations of just dealing with that shitty family. The ending was satisfying. Do recommend as a summertime spooky read. Avatar: The Rise of Kyoshi by F.C. Yee. This takes place in the world of the animated show Avatar: The Last Airbender. It takes place hundreds of years before the show, and it's the origin story of Kyoshi, who became a legendary and respected avatar. I'm not going to waste time explaining the backstory here, so feel free to Google if you have no idea what Avatar is about. But the story starts with Kyoshi working in service to a boy called Yoon, who everyone believes is the avatar. But eventually it becomes clear that Kyoshi is actually the avatar, and she winds up on the run and hell-bent on revenge, but she needs to develop her powers first. This was 4 stars. The writing was great, very my style, just readable, not flowery, but still descriptive, plenty of humor. The characters were great, their relationships were done well. There's a very sweet little romance that was only as present as it needed to be. There are just some well-handled themes. All of the bending magic was fun. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to someone who didn't watch and enjoy the show. I just wouldn't really see the need to do that, but if you have seen the show, I think this is worth the read. The ending was a little less fulfilling than I would have liked. I think Kyoshi's thunder is kind of stolen a little bit in the process. And there is a second book. It's a duology, and I'm sure I'll eventually read it, but it's not like high priority. Heavenbreaker by Sara Wolf. I listened to this on audiobook as well, which was narrated by Ashley Bryce. This is a YA sci-fi fantasy about a girl named Sonali, who is the cast-off bastard daughter of a noble father, and the book opens with her just having killed him because he killed her mother. And she has vowed to destroy his noble house and his legacy in revenge, and it involves her learning how to ride and control this giant mech called a steed that's used for sport by the nobles in what are called jousts in space. I don't know, so sick. Like, it just sounds so cool. This takes place on a space station hundreds of years after a war between humans and an alien enemy. And this surprised me by being very intriguing, very engaging and fun. This was a 4.5 star. I had a great time with it. I liked Sonali. She was just very focused and intense, just determined to achieve her goals. And I think that this might have been kind of falsely advertised as a romantasy or like a sci-fi romance, and I would not call it that. Like, there is a very minor romantic subplot, but like, don't read this for the romance. The setting and the lore is cool. I hope that it's explored a little more in the next book. I believe this is going to be a duology, and I have never seen any Gundam, so like, I don't really know what I'm talking about, but you know, I think this is kind of like Gundam. It has some tropes, and the characters can be a little, you know, dramatic, but like, I was invested. There's a rebellion going on as well. There's stuff with AI. Just, I don't know, a little something for everyone. And I will be reading the next book after it comes out, I think next year. Traitor's Moon by Lynn Flewelling. This is the third book in the Night Runner high fantasy series, which centers around two men named Sarah Gill and Alec, who are master spies, thieves, rogues, etc. They are romantic partners as well, so if you want adult high fantasy with gay main characters, highly recommend. This book was super heavy on politicking. The two of them traveled to the land of the Aranfae, who are similar to elves, and they're part of a delegation trying to establish a treaty between their nations to get support for the war that's going on. And unfortunately, this was like a 3.5 star because it was so incredibly slow and not much happens, like especially comparing it to the previous two books, the first two books, which I gave both 5 stars, and like those were just a great mix of both intrigue and action. The second half of this picks up a bit after a murder happens, but there was like so much exposition here that just like made it drag on. Even though I love Sarah Gill, the characters are all still great, and like there's humor in this, and you get to learn more about Sarah Gill's life and the hardship that he's going through as an exile of the Aranfae. It sounds like book 4 will have more action and excitement, so I'm looking forward to that, but I'm kind of sad that I didn't like love this one. The Last Word by Taylor Adams. I listened to this on audiobook, narrated by Carlotta Brenton and Jim Meskimen. This is a thriller about a struggling girl named Emma who's living a secluded life, house-sitting for several months, reading lots of ebooks, and one day she reads a really terrible self-published horror thriller and leaves a 1-star review of it. The author contacts her and demands that she take the review down, which she refuses to do, and then weird stuff starts happening around the house, and it's clear that the author somehow found her and is stalking her and might be trying to kill her. This was a 4.5 star read. The premise just like cracked me up. Like, I know how butthurt people get about negative reviews, and of course the logical place to take that is to be so upset as to try and murder someone over it. And this does have a satirical coding to it, but it is like a genuine thriller. Emma is going through a very difficult trauma, so I don't know, I'd say maybe look up content warnings if you need to, but it will spoil one of the major mysteries in this. There were some very sad and emotional moments that were heavy-hitting, but also like the stalking author is just the most quintessential neckbeard. Like, it was too good. There is a dog in the book, and spoiler alert, he does not die. So don't worry. And you get the point of view of Emma and also of the author. And overall, this was fun. Kind of campy, kind of meta. And I personally enjoyed this more than No Exit by the author. I think a lot of people love No Exit. I thought this was better. Do recommend. Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. The movie of the same name is based off this book, if you didn't already know. It's a sci-fi classic about this eccentric old rich guy who creates this theme park that's populated by dinosaurs that have been recreated using ancient dinosaur DNA, and he invites several people to come check it out before it opens, and eventually havoc ensues. And this was a really fun read, 4.5 stars. The book is much more thorough than the movie in setting the scene for the rise of this park, explaining the state of scientific research at the time, and just some of the like ethical dilemmas that it presents. It's very plot driven. The character dialogue is very bland and matter of fact. It also has some mixed media elements like charts and graphs and user interfaces that I found very fun. I enjoy mixed media. It reads a little dry at times. It kind of reminded me of Rendezvous with Rama by Arthur C. Clarke in that way, like how it goes into like the nitty-gritty of how this or that would work. Both of them are super plot driven, but unlike Rama, Jurassic Park does have some high-octane moments with really intense, you know, dinosaur danger. The dinosaurs were cool. I had fun Googling them. It has a sort of open ending, like the main plot has a conclusion, but it just very much sets up for a sequel, which I would be interested in reading. Very fun, iconic story. I enjoyed it. And the last book I'm going to talk about today, it's a bit of a bummer just because it was a pretty mid-read, and that's The Book Eaters by Sunyi Dean. This is a contemporary fantasy about this secret community of book eaters, which is exactly what it sounds like. They survive by literally eating book pages, and this community is very patriarchal. Women are rare, and their role is to get married and have children. And the main character, Devon, has a son born with the urge to eat human minds rather than books. So she goes on the run with him while trying to find a way to get him access to this special drug that curbs his urges. I gave this 2.5 stars. It wasn't bad, but I was never drawn in by the story or the characters. The motherhood theme was more prevalent than I expected or cared for. I was hoping to get to enjoy some interesting world building, but like there's only enough explanation there to make the story work. I found the writing just very boring and whatever. And the author calls, so mind eaters like her son, they're called dragons, and they're controlled by people called knights. And I don't know what it was. That just read as like silly to me. I don't know. I wasn't a fan. Just couldn't take it very seriously. I enjoyed the parts that were about rebelling against patriarchy. Devon is also a lesbian. She's kind of morally gray, willing to hurt innocent people for her son. So there's this discussion of love and how it can be really hard and devastating. And it's currently a standalone, but it sets up for a sequel, which I would not be interested in reading. It was just a real shrug of a book for me, sadly. Thank you so much for sticking around if you made it this far. I know this was super long, but if I didn't cram these all into one video, then I would just never get around to talking about them. Too much work to make these 3 separate videos for 3 separate months at this point. So yeah, that covered from June through August, and I will be filming a separate video for the books that I read in September. So that will be coming. I'm probably going to push through and film it right after this, but I'm excited that fall is here. But I also lament the passing of summer. I love sunshine and warmth, and I'm always ready for spring and warm weather as soon as Christmas wraps up. So I try to appreciate the warm weather while I have it, because it won't be long before I'm missing it with my whole heart again. So thank you so much for watching. It feels good to be filming again. Happy spooky season. I can't wait to read some horror thrillers in October, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye!